Cybersecurity becomes almost a personal matter when you're working in a war zone and information superiority counts. My next guest spent 14 months in Afghanistan before the U.S. withdrawal. He's a retired Navy captain. He's now CEO of Coalfire, a cybersecurity company. Tom McAndrew joins me now. Mr. McAndrew, good to have you with us.
Hey, Tom. Thank you for having me.
And you've kind of pivoted back and forth between industry and as a reservist who reserve became much less of a potential and more of a reality, sounds like.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think most people aren't aware of the way that the world works, but a huge part of our military force are made of reservists, National Guardsmen that have everyday jobs and then answer the call to go where our nation asks me. And I had the great privilege of being a Navy reservist and being sent back out to the Middle East for about a little over 400-day deployment, which was interesting to say the least, but it was great experience, and I'm happy to share it here.
Yeah, that's more than a weekend or a couple weeks, 400 days. And what did you do over there?
It was very interesting. I was very lucky. I got sent over there, and when you show up, the way it works is there's requirements, but then there's also the needs of what's going on there. And at the time when I showed up there's a big need on unmanned systems and AI. So as we worked with a lot of the partner nations that we had out there, they were very interested in unmanned capabilities and getting more information. And so this idea came up of creating what ended up being Task Force 59, which is the Navy's first forward-deployed unmanned task force that focused on unmanned systems and AI integration. And so it was great to be I'm an entrepreneur and like working with startups, and kind of doing a startup within the DoD was both fun, but also challenging as well.
And Task Force 59 was floating or flying?
Yeah, it is kind of interesting that the Navy, that then you're on the shore, and I spent most of my time in Bahrain out there. But it's a little bit of both. I mean, one of the issues with the military is we tend to kind of have, pilots fly airplanes and ship drivers that drive ships, and we have very different things. And when it comes to unmanned, it's kind of an all-domain sort of area. And so as you see now happening with Ukraine and other areas, that has evolved. So it was kind of a first of its kind task force that we learned a lot of different things into it, and it's still there, it's still growing, and still making a big difference out there. So it's just great to be part of it.
Now, at the time you departed for the 400 days, were you the CEO of Coalfire at that time?
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm a CEO of a private equity-backed company, and I remember getting the orders and not knowing what would happen, right? We have a lot of these rules that protect National Guards and reservists, which requires you to, keep their job, make sure they would get promoted. But that doesn't really work as well when you're the CEO, because you can't really delegate the strategy of the company for a year. You can't do those areas. And so I got lucky in one respect, because you get sent to wherever you need to go. And luckily, I was largely part of some shore command, so I was able to kind of do my day job and then log on at night and do Zoom calls. And, and back then we still had COVID going on from 2021, 2022. So being more remote was less of an issue than maybe it would be today. It certainly had some challenges into it. And there'd be times like when we had the withdrawal from Afghanistan that we supported, there were certain periods where I just told the team, hey, I'm out for the next foreseeable future. I'll come back online.
Interesting. So, yeah, I mean, you're not at the level where you're going to invoke necessarily detailed employee rights with the investors, because you are the CEO. But I imagine you had to probably put in 18-hour days at the minimum to at least minimally satisfy the the back home duties while doing full-time for the military.
As a CEO and also, they're both 24/7, 365. So what's great is I had great military bosses that understood the unique skill sets that I brought in and provided some flexibility. And then same thing back with my company, right? And how to manage this. So we're doing integrations and, support on that on the back end. And then on the military side, right, there'll be ups and downs and things like that. So yeah, it was definitely a challenge. And I didn't really know how it would work, but really kind of took it one day at a time. And just, I think that's one thing that maybe a lot of Americans really don't understand, is just how amazingly supportive and creative I think our military leaders are in taking the best that they can from reservists and National Guardsmen out there. I mean, since 2001, there's been over 800,000 people mobilized to support our needs, and we continue to stand by.
We're speaking with Tom McAndrew. He is CEO of Coalfire and retired naval captain. Is there a support group for people at the executive level who get called into long deployments and kind of share best practices for keeping your company alive and led even while you're away?
I wish there were. Maybe maybe there are. If I did, maybe I'm just finding out now I can do it. I mean, most of all, it doesn't happen a whole lot, right? I mean, just the burdens of both are difficult, and usually people find other ways to kind of give back. There is what's called ESGR, which is the Employers Support of the Guard and Reserve, and they're a great resource that provides support for any reservists or guardsmen as they deal with mobilization deploys. And their job is to provide resources, help educate also employers of what they need to do by law, and also kind of what are some best practices. Like a good best practice that a lot of people have is when reservists or guardsmen go do their 2 or 4 weeks, that they'll continue to pay them or do their differential pay or cover their health insurance, because these little nuances become a big deal if you end up shifting your medical and you've got families and all those sorts of areas. So the ESGR is one great support that's really helped out as well. And then on the civilian side, larger organizations tend to have, big veteran support groups, but smaller ones really don't. And I'm lucky. We have over 100 veterans in our group. But when it comes to kind of reservists and guardsmen, it's pretty small. And I think most people don't really realize the dual lives that a lot of people live.
And working in the area that you mentioned, the Task Force 59 unmanned systems, these are all data and network-driven types of operations. And so you had a pretty visceral understanding of the importance of keeping all of that secure. Did the learnings that you had in working with Task Force 59 maybe inform a little bit of the cybersecurity work that you do?
My worlds have all kind of come together, right? I was active duty in the Navy for 5 or 6 years, and then when I got out, I actually wanted to kind of completely detach from the DoD, and I joined a small cybersecurity startup and worked with banks and regulations. And today, the background of cybersecurity business is regular business for organizations, and cyber warfare used to be something no one knew about, but now it's in the news every day. And we leverage our commercial systems, right? We leverage a lot of commercial platforms, what's out there in the industry. So all that stuff has really kind of come together. So I'm lucky/unlucky to kind of have been in both in the civilian world and the military world, and then to see the importance of cybersecurity emerge has been fantastic.
And after 5 years in the Navy, you're still pretty young, and you're not a total career 25, 35, 45-year type of person. Do you feel that in going to business and being in leadership positions is maybe easier having had a short military stint versus some of the many starred individuals that come out after 35 or 40 years and find that business is a totally different environment with a wholly different command and control culture than they might have had for those 35 or 40 years in the military?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually just had a conversation yesterday with a retired 3-star admiral, and when I was talking to him, he said, the difference is today we live off of our iPhones, our emails, right? And we do all the prep, and in a lot of military environments, you can't do that. So we're still very pad and paper, and we have a lot of kind of communication structure. And I was talking yesterday, it would be so great if military leaders could get that commercial experience to see how do we deal with risk and use technology and do things at a much faster, efficient pace. And it's also for civilian leaders to get the military understanding of the authorities and the complexities and the real world implications. So it's very difficult to do both, and it's not a knock on one or the other. But if you know more than you can take a 30-year civilian and make them an admiral and make them run something, you can't take a 30-year admiral and drop them into this. So it has much more to do with the people than I think the training that they end up doing.
Yeah, more than the technology, it's the culture of business where even with subordinates, there's a lot of collaboration, let's say, and the need to gain cooperation. Maybe that's more pronounced than it is in the military.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that the leadership part is the one that I'm probably most thankful for in the military. I mean, I graduated in 2000 from the Naval Academy and went to my first ship in 2001, and I had, I think, 20 or 25 people. Most 22-year-olds don't get 25 people that they're responsible for, many of them older than you, chiefs and other senior leaders that call you sir, but you rely on them and you build their trust onto it. And so I was very grateful to have that experience. And then 9/11 happened and ended up doing 2 deployments out to the Middle East. And so that, by the time I got out when I was 27, I had a lot more, I think, leadership experience than others, which really was helpful in a startup where startups and other cybersecurity in particular, we have a lot of really good techies that know the technology but it's around managing people and leadership and building strong teams. And we see that as a challenge in a lot of cybersecurity spaces.
And having stepped aboard your first ship in 2001, in many ways, you are truly a child of the 9/11 generation.
Yeah, I think we were the last class that went through, we go what's called Surface Warfare Officers School. So when we graduate, we ended up going to Newport, Rhode Island. And, back then it was pre 9/11. So we thought we'd join the Navy, see the world, and be floating around and doing all